from the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador. I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is from the South. Thousands of people marched in Colombia to protest against the president's call to revise the peace agreements signed with former FARC combatants. Protesters rejected Iván Duque's intention to modify 6 out of 159 articles in a law that would aid in implementing the 2016 peace accords. During the rally, thousands chanted their support for the special jurisdiction for peace, the governmental body created to implement the accords. The special jurisdiction has already established a court to investigate war crimes committed during the conflict, but it has been heavily criticized by Duque for being too weak.
This is a march of hope to guarantee truth, justice, and to close off any possibility of impunity. That's what we're doing today, accompanying the JEP, and above all, we're certifying that it's an instrument of justice.
We are not going to allow this opportunity to be taken away from us. As a generation, we have a chance to live in a country in peace. We do not want other generations to live through an armed conflict.
Indigenous and Afro-descendant communities that are mobilizing in the southwest of the country. The indigenous communities have blocked a major highway in that area of the country following a week of protests against the government of Duque. They demand that the president engage in constructive conversations with social and indigenous organizations who say he has breached previous agreements regarding their lands. Workers of the Ecuadorian company Furukawa Plantaciones are denouncing labor exploitation and abuse. A recent Ombudsman's Office report concluded that their case is one of modern slavery. Our correspondent Denise Herrera has the details.
The Furukawa company was founded in 1963. Its main activity is the cultivation of abaca and other textile fiber plants. One of its slogans is to develop the company and care for the employees' well-being. But a recent report from the Ombudsman's Office revealed serious workers' rights violations, such as Walter, one of the complaints employees who has been working 25 years in the company.
Before the situation that we are now facing, we all met and we discussed what we have been going through and how we could recover something from our work. We have lived without insurance or a fair wage. There was nothing for us.
According to the Ombudsman's report, the Furukawa company has violated the human rights of its workers for 56 years. Most of them native people, just like Irene, who is a mother of 3 and is one of the hundreds of workers who for the first time are standing up for their rights.
We feel bad because we do not have any benefits. As you can see, we have to work under that scorching sun because this company does not give us anything. We have asked them if they will give us gloves to work with, but they didn't. We have to pay for all the basic materials for work.
Nosotros mismos a veces tenemos que comprar para este trabajo.
José Rodríguez is the tenant of one of the lands where the company operates in Santo Domingo in the Ecuadorian coast, and he is demanding a settlement for his work.
We are tenants, and we are treated as workers. For us, the pay of $640 does not get us anything. We have to pay for the tools. If a donkey dies, we have to find another. If a machine is damaged, we have to fix it. We have to pay for everything here.
Ecuador's constitution prohibits slavery and labor exploitation in all forms. A member of the Ombudsman's Office points out that in this case, several departments of the state have a responsibility to take action.
The issue of housing is one of the problems problems because people do not have a place to live in. Conditions are inhumane. Families are living in small spaces. There is a responsibility from the Agriculture Ministry to award land to landless farmers. We have recommended that if we're going to deliver land, we have to implement a housing plan as well. And on the other hand, there's a responsibility of the Labor Ministry. How has it allowed a company to operate for 56 years when during one of its visits it found over 31 violations?
In the same way, the representative of the Ombudsman's office denounces potentially similar cases around the country.
In the Ombudsman's office, no cases like these are registered, but we have been warned by other social organizations that, for example, similar cases are taking place with palmicultores in Esmeraldas and also with farmers in the Amazon.
Furthermore, the Ombudsman's report indicates that according to public information, the legal representative and secretary of the Directory of Purukawa is the Dr. Marcelo Cicerón Almeida, Minister of the Supreme Court of Justice, advisor of the Presidency and Ministry of Health, and honorary consul of the Kingdom of Norway since 2003. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Ecuador.
The president of Mozambique fears that the death toll from Cyclone Idai could exceed 1,000 victims, as South Africa has announced it is sending troops to help with recovery efforts. The tropical storm has damaged 90% of the southern city of Beira. A dam burst on Sunday, cutting off the last road remaining to the city of about 500,000 people. According to the Red Cross and the Red Crescent Federation, at least 180 people died in Mozambique, Malawi, Zimbabwe, and South Africa.
Flying sheets of metal, decapitated people. Some people are in hospital. It's really bad. No one is rescuing us here. We don't eat properly, we don't sleep properly, we have no home.
The biggest threat we have now, even bigger than the cyclone, is floods, because it's raining more and more, and the hydrographical basins are increasing their level. And here we are in the lower part of the province, which means all the water comes this side.
A group of school children from Zimbabwe have been rescued after being stranded for 2 days in the aftermath of Cyclone Idai. Following the heavy storms, roads and bridges were destroyed, leaving people trapped by floods. Search and rescue operations are still ongoing. The death toll for floods in Indonesia has risen to 89 people. More than 4,000 have been displaced and dozens are injured and still missing. The disaster was triggered by torrential rain and landslides and has mostly affected the easternmost province of Papua. The evacuation process is still taking place, with affected areas that haven't been reached yet. Those displaced are being sheltered in 6 evacuation centers. Venezuela's government has condemned the forced and illegal occupation of some of its diplomatic properties in the United States. Foreign Minister Jorge Arriaza said that this is a clear violation of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. U.S. authorities must correct this irregular situation immediately. This was a response to representatives of opposition lawmaker Juan Guaidó, who illegally forced their way into 3 of the country's diplomatic properties. Guaidó's envoy says they have occupied 2 buildings in Washington and 1 in New York. And the People's Forum, an incubator for social movements in New York, immediately responded, issuing a call-out for a protest against U.S. intervention. The People's Forum says that this is another aggression in the long list of attacks against the Bolivarian Revolution. Shame! 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 And that video was reportedly New York City police escorting the group aligned with the Venezuelan opposition on their way out as they were booed by activists. The opposition had plans to celebrate, but protesters blocked the entrance to the building. What those demonstrators had to say about why the rapid response was so important.
Banks using their power financially to take the money from Venezuela and literally directly take food out of Venezuelan mouths and take supplies and necessary materials out of from the people's hands, right? And let's talk about how the Maduro government, everything they've been able to do for the people, everything the Bolivarian Revolution has been able to do for the people. $7 billion are being stolen from the Venezuelan people by the U.S. government every year. They're strangling the Venezuelan economy just like they did in Chile in 1973 and just like they've done throughout history. Let us find out the truth.
The president of Cuba has condemned threats leveled against the life of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro by a retired U.S. general. Former General Anthony Tata was speaking on right-wing U.S. channel Fox News. The statement is a further example of U.S. hostility against Venezuela. Díaz-Canel said that the declaration was unacceptable against the leader of a sovereign country. In Nicaragua, the delegation representing the government in negotiations with the opposition has released a statement declaring its commitment to peaceful dialogue and questioning the attitude of the opposition. Through the Foreign Minister Denis Moncada, the government rejected provocations of those at the negotiating table who incited altercations endangering public order last Saturday. The government asked for seriousness, sincerity, and responsibility in order to reach positive agreements for all Nicaraguans. The Brazilian and U.S. governments have signed an agreement that allows the U.S. to use a key space center in the north of Brazil. This is the first concrete agreement made between the two governments during Bolsonaro's visit to the U.S. The Alcantara Space Center is a significant site to launch satellites into orbit as well as military use. Nonetheless, this agreement still needs the approval of the Brazilian Congress. We have more stories coming up. We'll be back. Welcome back. The lower house in Haiti has voted to remove the Prime Minister Jean-Henri Seon. This comes just 6 months after Seon took office in the midst of a persistent economic and political crisis. 93 members of parliament voted in favor of the motion to sack Seon, while 6 voted against and 3 abstained. The Prime Minister did not attend the vote. He had expected to face a vote of no confidence in the Senate, but they did not reach quorum. Our correspondent Kendi Sidor in Port-au-Prince has more.
The Chamber of Deputies voted to remove the Prime Minister Jean-Henri Seon during a special session with 93 of 117 deputies voting to remove the Prime Minister. But the session took place in his absence because both chambers demanded his presence on the same day. There appears to be a conflict between the two chambers after the vote against the Prime Minister took place. He was in the Senate to argue against the decision to remove him from office. According to the PM, the session was invalid because he can't be in the two chambers simultaneously. The Senate was unable to finish its session because there are only 10 senators present, and normally the body functions with a minimum of 16 senators present. The parliamentary conflict goes on, because the President of the Senate said the session will continue next Wednesday. That means the Senate continues to recognize the authority of Jean-Henri Seyon, despite the vote to dismiss him in the Chamber of Deputies. The vote to remove the Prime Minister 6 months after his ratification was expected, because he had been in conflict with the President, Jovenel Moïse. The President isn't satisfied with his work, especially with regard to a national dialogue. There are also people with the President who believe that the Prime Minister is looking to replace him. It's important to note that the majority of deputies and senators side with the President. It's impossible to say what's going to happen now, because the situation is completely new here.
Our correspondent Ken Disidor from Haiti. Now, gender rights have been at the center of political debates in Cuba, and at the heart of this discussion has been the National Center for Sex Education, led by Mariela Castro, the daughter of the former President Raúl Castro. Our correspondent went to see how they are addressing equal rights.
This is one of the regular community fairs held by Senesex, the National Center for Sex Education. This time, it's focusing on parenting, equal rights, and responsibilities for mothers and fathers. What role should men play in educating their children? How can they grow up with more independence? What are the limits? These are some of the questions up for debate at sessions like this, marked by creativity and humor.
We have seen that bringing up children is still seen as a very onerous task, especially for women. Many of them think they are overprotective, and that kind of dependence does not favor the development of the children as autonomous, cooperative, and participatory individuals.
This is one of the training sessions.
Ya llegué y ya me voy. Javier, espera un momento. Pon la mochila en su lugar y dime una cosa. ¿Se puede saber a dónde vas?
Here, the youngsters between 10 and 15 engage in video debates to discuss their relations with their parents, their families, and their friends.
What we aim to do here is talk about and identify the best ways for these boys and girls to confront the things that hurt them, to move on and develop new skills to be able to grow in a healthy, independent way. There is no one prescription, but a lot of things to think about.
The idea is to challenge traditional views of parenting, where it is the mothers who are supposed to care for the family at home while the fathers go out to provide sustenance. The experts here see this division of labor between men and women as a logic of exploitation, designed to reproduce the capitalist social order, one that still persists in Cuba and requires gradual changes by the revolution.
The point of this activity is to help our people overcome the patterns of dependency that came out of the later phases of capitalism, patterns that still produce a lot of dependency and are a means of dominating the population.
They say the aim is to make people aware of this, so that they can promote new kinds of subjectivity in a society that is itself still new, as here in Cuba.
U.S. sanctions imposed on Venezuela are hurting Guyana's economy and the island's financial relations with its South American neighbor. Guyana currently owes Venezuela roughly $115 million under the Petrocaribe deal. However, the government has not been able to make cash payments to Venezuela given the U.S.-imposed financial restrictions. Guyana's Finance Minister Winston Jordan says repayments are being held in a special account until the sanctions are lifted.
I think also, Mr. Speaker, we must...
The Caribbean Development Bank is projecting a 3% growth rate for Antigua and Barbuda's economy this year. This is due to increase in tourism and construction activity. The Caribbean Tourism Organization says stayover arrivals grew by just over 9% last year. Similarly, cruise ship passengers' arrivals increased by just over 13%. Sudan and South Sudan have agreed to demilitarize the disputed common borders between the two countries within 1 month. They will implement previous recommendations of a deal for forming a demilitarized buffer zone between them. Sudan and South Sudan have disputed the border and traded accusations of rebel support since the separation of South Sudan in 2011. Officials say the black boxes from the crashed Ethiopian Airlines flight show similarities to the Lion Air crash in Indonesia. According to Ethiopian Minister of Transport, at least one similarity is the length of time the planes were in the air before crashing. In October, all 189 people on board Lion Air Flight 610 were killed when the flight went down over the Java Sea in Indonesia 13 minutes after takeoff.
It's been already indicated that there are similarities. Particular similarities will be explained and more details will come out at each stage. But there are indications that there are clear similarities, especially with the number of minutes they spent after takeoff. But with the news revelations, it is better to pose questions to relevant authorities, as I'm doing right now here.
The World Food Programme has stopped distributing food aid after 3 people died and 200 others became sick. The Uganda International Red Cross and Red Crescent says cases of people with suspected food poisoning were reported Saturday at Lotome Health Center in Napak. This was a day after food distribution to families. The World Food Programme and the government of Uganda are still investigating the case. People have been warned not to eat the distributed food. Uganda's members of parliament from the ruling party have endorsed 74-year-old President Yoweri Museveni to run for the 2021 presidential election. A victory at next election would extend Museveni's rule to 40 years. The government removed the 2-term presidential limit in 2005 and in 2018 scrapped the age limit of 75. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa got a taste of the daily frustration of working-class commuters after the train he boarded on Monday was delayed by over 2 hours. Ramaphosa said the delay was unacceptable. The country's cities continue to be divided along race and class lines, with poor, predominantly black citizens living on the urban periphery far from the city-based workplaces. Getting to work can be expensive and time-consuming. The Colombian city of Medellin held a gay Miss Universe beauty pageant where transgender people and drag queens competed. Contestants could represent a country of their choice for the event, which aimed to send a message of inclusion to society. The winners received a cash prize and opportunities to participate in international competitions. We're taking one last break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Israeli authorities have demolished 2 Palestinian-owned buildings in northern Israel. According to witnesses, heavily armed Israeli forces raided the area with several bulldozers and began destroying Palestinian-owned structures in the area. Residents said the buildings were demolished under the pretext that they were built without permits. Nearly all Palestinian applications for building permits are denied by the Israeli authorities, forcing communities to build illegally. The European Union chief diplomat Federica Mogherini has held a meeting with China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi. During the meeting, Wang Yi reiterated his country's call for a mutually beneficial relationship between his country and the European Union. He also condemned what he called the United States' abnormal and immoral attempts to bring down Chinese companies by using what he calls baseless accusations. Meanwhile, energy experts are warning that the United States' shale oil production could jeopardize plans by OPEC to stabilize oil prices. The International Energy Agency forecasts that the United States will account for 70% of oil production in the next few years. It added that such a scenario would make it hard for OPEC to influence the price of oil.
At this moment in time, there is certainly a need for both shale and everybody else's oil barrels. Whether there will be a need in 5 years' time, the fight gets tighter, if peak demand happens, that's a big question. I suspect it will, and I suspect OPEC will not be able to hold on to the maximized price over market share strategy as they have done for the last 50 years.
A comics exhibition in Lebanon's capital, Beirut, is highlighting the experiences of refugees. The In-Transit exhibition has 350 artworks by 37 artists from 12 countries, including Syria, Germany, and Egypt. The illustrations are aimed at showing the problems migrants and refugees face. The illustrations are showing at the Museum and Urban Cultural Center until March 24th.
It is kind of an artistic medium that can express stories and important serious subjects that the country is dealing with, or that are happening in the whole region, in a way that is different from how we usually receive information, through television, the news, and even photography. These illustrations are done in a narrative way, visually and through the text.
With that, we come to the end of this news brief, but as you know, you can find these and many other stories by going to our website, telesurenglish.net. For our viewers in Africa, you can find us on Starsat channel 461 in South Africa and 539 in Nigeria, and you can join us on social media. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.